Welcome back to Visual Anthology's Physical Inventory Training. In this sixth chapter, we'll show you how to wrap up your physical inventory, whether you've done a manual count or a hand count, or you've used the portable rental scanners. Now in my system, I've got a physical inventory that's been underway for some time here. And you can see here's my OpenPI, and here is a series, because I've been using rental scanners, of update records and some manual records as well. Now, one of the first things I should do is ensure that I have no further scan status batch records. And I could sort by the status column and just verify, no, I don't have any more outstanding scan batch records. So at this point, I can go in to my MasterPI and begin the process of wrapping up the last few details. Now, if you have any questions on how to fine-tune certain things like doing hand counts or dealing with scanner batches, you should review some of the previous chapters. Now, on this screen, you'll notice that the OpenPI record has the F12 Post Update button lit up. That is because there are still some items whose count quantity has a value in it. So, one of the last things I need to do is to actually post this MasterPI record. And of course, at this point now, that post update button is dimmed out and there's nothing left with a value in the count quantity column. One of the last things I need to do is to double check and make sure I didn't miss a lot of items. So, to do that, I can sort by the discrepancy column. And the first thing I might do is just scroll to the very top to find all those items that perhaps I missed. Well, in this case, let's say the Developing Web Systems title. Notice that the system says that I had 4, at least thought I had 4. I counted 3, so there's a discrepancy of -1. And in fact, most of these titles, you can see I've counted something at least. So this may just be items that were off by 1. Maybe it was shrinkage, whatever. But what I'm interested in is maybe a little further down to see the items that look like I haven't counted anything. So here's a run. You can see that in the military titles, it looks like I've not counted any of them. That's probably something that got overlooked. Maybe it's an item that's on a shelf in the back room. Maybe it was underneath a table. Whatever reason, I need to take a few moments to try to find those items. And in fact, perhaps I do. Let's go ahead and correct a couple of them. So I've corrected some of those items that I apparently had missed. I've found them and now they're fixed. So again, don't forget to save. So now I've gone through and I'm fairly much happy with most of my discrepancies. I might want to go now to the other end of the spectrum, to the positive discrepancies. These are items that perhaps I was off. And in fact, there may be a title out there that I've mistyped. And in the case, here's one where my discrepancy is off by quite a lot, by 52. And in fact, maybe I go back and I look through and I realize, wait a minute, that shouldn't have been 52, but it should have been 25. Just switched my numbers when I was putting that number in manually. So while we can't completely change just the total count value, there's a little bit of a trick that you can do to either increase or, in this case, back off that total count. If I needed to add more, I would simply go in and increase the count quantity. But because I needed to change the count down, I need to back this down. In fact, because it should have been 25, I need to bring this down by 27. I can actually go in and put a negative count quantity. So there's my negative count quantity. This is the number that I want to decrease the total count by. So I'll say enter line. Now there's a -27 in count quantity. The total count is at the moment 52. And then once I post this, it will drop that total count down. So don't forget to save. And we'll do one last final F12 post update. All that's doing is summing up everything in the count quantity column to total count. So again, I'm on my OpenPI. The F12 post update button is dimmed out, and there's nothing left with a value in count quantity. So reviewing my discrepancy columns is a good way to make sure I didn't miss anything. It's something you might want to do periodically, but definitely do it towards the very end. One of the other last things that you want to do at this point is to, before you really finalize and change your numbers, is maybe run a report just to double check some information. You will be presented with the opportunity to print your exception or physical inventory report as you're doing that final adjustment, but perhaps you want to take a break now and do that report real quick just to get a double check of the numbers. So if you do F11 print, you'll be presented with the physical inventory options. So you can do a full physical inventory report, which means print everything, or if you only want to focus on the items that were wrong, the exceptions or the discrepancies, then you could choose to do an exception report. Down here you can choose to say, show me all sections, or you know what, I really just want to focus in on some of the children's section. So I could do a report of everything or just the things that are off, and then I can pick the particular sections, or I could just do all sections. Now down here I can choose to see how do I want that information sorted. Perhaps I don't want it by department and section, but maybe I want it by section and then author. And I want a subtotal underneath each section of the items that were off. So I can do F11 print, and because my printer is not set up, it's giving me this message, but I'll go ahead and say OK. So now I can say preview this report. So here is a list, a report broken down by section with totals to tell me what was the retail amount of what I thought I had on hand, what was the retail amount of the amounts counted, as well as what were the cost amounts of the amounts I thought I had on hand, and the cost amounts of the items that I had counted, as well as the discrepancy. In fact, if I jump to the very last page, we can zoom in on this. You can see that there's all the total numbers. Of course, you'll be presented with the option to print that option for sure once you're completely done with your physical inventory. It's part of the finalization. At this point, though, I've double-checked all my numbers. Things are where they really should be as I expect them. So one of the last things I may want to do, and one of the last things I really should do, is to do a quick backup and reindex my system, just to make sure that everything's in tip-top shape. Because when I do this finalize inventory, this Alt F12, this will go through, and this is every single record in my inventory, which could be thousands upon thousands. Because this could be so huge, I want to make sure everything's in good shape and that everything is going to work quickly for me, and I want to make sure that I'm really ready to do this. And this can take a few minutes when you do the final adjustment, so it would be a good time to do a quick backup, reindex, have everybody finish up what they're working on elsewhere if they're maybe trying to get some inventory information for a customer if I had to be open. So one of the last things is make sure you've done F12 post, save everything out, and now I can go in and go to your tools menu and do your database reindex. And then also, just in case there was something that was wrong, you might want to do a quick backup and make sure that this copy open files is checked and just do run. Once you're done with that, you've double-checked everything, you're satisfied that all those numbers are okay. At this point, now you can finalize your inventory. Now, remember that this physical inventory is going to replace my on-hand with whatever is in the total count column. If your stores had to be open during this process, and you're unsure if your total count is really accurate, now might be a good time to run either a purchase order status report to see if anyone shouldn't have, but if anyone has slipped any receiving memos for the last couple of days, I could print those reports and double check those items. I might also consider doing a sales history report, and that is something we really recommend if you've had your store open. Do a sales history report for the date range that you were doing your physical inventory, print it out, and actually go back and double check those items. Perhaps you found that you had sold a few of a title. In fact, let's find a good example here. Let's say that we realized we had really sold some of this Alamo title. So because we're going to replace this on hand with the total count, our on hand may actually be 9 right now, but because we counted it before the item was sold, our total count is not correct. So, like that Bartholomew's title, I need to drop the total count by a little bit. So I can go in and say, you know what, make that a -1. And actually maybe I find at the same time, whoops, I really did miss one last item. I have plenty of opportunities to fix that. So I can go in and fix the last couple of details. And again, don't forget to save. Do one last final post update, and that will decrease the items that I had sold that had counted before they were sold. And I wanted to make sure by looking at my sales history report that those total count columns were absolutely correct. So I've gone back in and I've double checked my numbers. I've fine-tuned anything that I might have sold. I've gone through now and I've done a database reindex. I've done a quick backup. At this point, I'm really ready to wrap everything up. And again, your on-hand will be replaced with whatever is in the total count column. So if you've missed a series items like those that you see here, their on-hands will be changed to 0. So if all is well and you're comfortable with that, then the last thing you want to do, the very last step, the thing that will wrap this whole thing up is this Alt F12 adjust INV. So we'll do Alt F12, and this is the final one. Do you really want to close out? Yes, I do. And I am given the option again to print a report, but I just did it a moment ago, so I'll say no. So now it is going through and it is touching every single inventory item, which could be quite a few. So this might take a few moments. So let it sit. Don't let anybody be in trying to do sales, trying to do receiving. They need to stay out of the program while you're doing this part. You don't want this part to get interrupted because it's such a big process. So once this finishes, you'll notice that its status will go from open to complete. Once that status is complete, then you know that all your on-hands have been changed, everything is settled out and done at that point. Then you can go in and do any double checking to see if there's any other questions or any other items that might have been misplaced or things that need to be dealt with. Okay, so now my inventory is complete. Notice the status is marked as complete. I cannot change anything anymore, so in fact, I can see what the effect of all that was. So let's go take a look at an item that I didn't count as many as I thought I had. So if we go back and we do right-click on the inventory record and do master file, we can go see that now the on-hand, instead of being 9, is now 2, and further, we have a record of the fact that we dropped its on-hand by a total of 7 and replaced its on-hand with 2. And we know exactly when that was. So over time, as you're doing your various inventory checks, you'll be able to see, oh yes, that's one that we had to correct via the physical inventory. That's about it, really, for physical inventory. If there's any questions, we highly encourage you to go back and maybe review some of the other chapters. Definitely go back in and print out the documentation you were provided for physical inventory, or look in your manual, go to the customer user zone and look at that information. We highly recommend you take the time to read those documents ahead of time, do some practicing before you jump in and try to do the physical inventory. That is one area that you really have to do it perfectly the first time to do it right. So don't skimp on spend a little time to practice and experiment with it. If you do have any questions, you can certainly contact support at anthology.com or simply call 800-819-0095 and any tech can help you out.